Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Glad to be with us. Tonight's presentation here at ULT San Diego is entitled Number, and that will be given to us by our own Desiree Van Sanen.
So the Hermetic statement, if the divine ancestry of man is sacred, so too numbers are sacred. And Pythagoras would agree with this. Numbers rule, or in this case, number rules the universe. Pythagoras would go on to say that number is the ruler of forms and ideas and the cause of gods and demons. And I think he means here demons, because he's not referring to some devilish evildoers. He's referring to the intermediaries between the gods and the humans. And somehow number is the ruler of even those gods. What is further interesting is he says that number is the ruler of ideas. So maybe we can have a conversation of what he means by that, that even ideas have underlying them number. Oh. So we're going to go through several topics. Hopefully it won't take too long to go through all of them. The first topic is, why do we consider numbers at all? What makes them unique? What makes them important, not just in theosophical study, but in just about every study under the sun? We're going to talk about the evolution of our concept of zero, from the concrete to the abstract. We're also going to go over a numerology technique called digital reduction, because from this point forward in the presentation, we're going to be using digital reduction to identify patterns. Some of those patterns are going to be in the Fibonacci sequence. We're going to go on and we're going to look at the number line from 1 to 9. Just sort of a cursory overview to look at it in terms of doubling and tripling, and also in terms of its symmetry. And we're going to be also looking at it in its relation to the Sephiroth. And this is actually ID'd in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine. We're also going to be considering the number from no number, as in the stanzas, and prime numbers, specifically 7, but not only 7, but we'll be looking at 7 primarily. But also, we'll be looking at number 9. It's not a prime, but it is an important number in our, well, they're all important because they all sort of come out of the same womb, so to speak. And then there'll be a brief summing up. So why do we consider numbers at all? Well, there's several reasons, but the most important ones that seem to come to my mind is, first of all, it's a universal language. If we think about language in general, we know that we have so many different cultures with different languages, different sounds, different treatments of sounds, different alphabets. So it's always up to interpretation. But numbers are different. Numbers have the same meaning no matter where they go. And so because they're universal, there's less of an opportunity to, fall into misinterpretation. A 2 plus 2 is 4, no matter where you go. And all studies depend on number, whether we know it or not. They often form the basis of their understanding. Even the root of the term mathematics means to learn, or the act of learning, or to be given a lesson. And so when we think about it in that context, we can understand how math and numbers really underlie things that we may not even think of, such as art or dance, music, even psychology, where we need statistics. It's not just limited to the sciences, in other words. Almost every study we can think of, or that I can think of, will have some element of number attached to it. Nature also expresses itself through number, through wave patterns, fractals, motions, and geometrics. In the words of Pythagoras, numbers contain the root and source of eternally flowing creation, which is an interesting thought because it's also at the basis of motion, in a sense. Therefore, number and numbers allow nature to tell a story about its forces, frequency, function, and form. Numbers are impersonal. So I won't be treating numbers in this space with any kind of sentiment. They're going to be completely impersonal. And in being so, I think they represent the essential beauty of nature's expressions. In the words of or ideology of Immanuel Kant, we want to see things as they exist and not try to, impose our emotions on them. And so in doing that, we do what we actually experience the beauty of something. In the words of Proclus, wherever there is number, there is beauty. I want to take us back first to talk about how these number systems came to be and the evolution of our concept of numbers, and not just numbers, but specifically zero. Well, back in the Paleolithic age, they used tally sticks, and sometimes tally sticks are still used today. But they found that these ancient sticks that go back, it says here 35,000 BC, but it could actually be much longer than that, further than that. These tally sticks were used to count things. They count things in the positive. In other words, the things that they had in their sights that could be tangible. So often wood, stones, or bones were used to mark these sticks to take note of what was in their physical environment. Excuse me. Here, the Ashango bone consists of tally marks running in 3 columns, which is interesting because it tells us they're really using some kind of a system to keep track of something. The older tally bones have been carbon dated to 35,000 BCE and beyond. It is speculated that beyond counting everyday objects, the sticks may have been used for astrological purposes, such as the tracking of seasons and celestial bodies. Some scientists have even theorized that they were a means of keeping track of menstrual cycles, because some of the things that a person would want to consider in their own existence is, how do I work with nature and its cycles to do things like plant or hunt or move, and also to determine longevity of your community. You would also need to keep track of menstrual cycles. In fact, there was one anthropologist who suggested that women may have been the first mathematicians. So zero and positional notation. What is positional notation? Well, it's a process we use to this day. This is the process of placing numbers in a specific column to determine their magnitude. It's how we tell a 2 from a 20, 200, or 2,000, etc. So this practice was used in many ancient cultures and served as a necessary tool. And as social structures grew, so did the need for systems to handle the organization of very large numbers. However, it would take quite a while before zero would be considered anything other than a placeholder. They're really not using a symbol for zero for some time, but they did have a place. The Sumerians did have a place, kind of like a placeholder. Let me see if we can read this here. So Sumerian and the later Babylonian scribes around 2000 BC used positional notation. First known use of a zero symbol dates to the Babylonian era, and this would be the latter part of the Babylonian era in the 3rd century BCE, based on multiples of 60. So they used a sexagesimal system. The Babylonians symbolized zero using 2 small wedges, but the sign was only used as a placeholder and never used on the right side of a number. So you see here in the bottom far left, this cuneiform number set here. The 2 zeros are in the center, but you would never find a 0 or a placeholder for a 0 before the 7, for instance. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic numerals base multiples of 10. So ranging from 3000 BCE to the first millennium of this common era. A zero glyph was used or introduced around 1740 BC. Hold on just one second. And it was mainly used for accounting texts. The symbol shown below meant beautiful and was meant to indicate a base level in drawings of tombs and pyramids. So we see it here. Does everybody see it where I'm pointing?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you. So the Mesoamerican Mayan zero dates from the year 31 BC, but I have found different articles that give different originations of their zero. But so 31 BC, found in the ancestral Olmec site of the Tres Zapotes in Veracruz, Mexico. The calendaring system has been in use at least since 500 BC. It is very likely that systems such as the long calendar, which requires the use of a zero and positional notation, were employed by earlier Mesoamerican civilizations such as the Olmec and Zapotec. The Mayan zero is represented by several symbols, so they're really unusual in this regard because they're using several different symbols. I'm not quite sure if the several different symbols have slightly different meanings or uses, but here where my pointer is a shell, or what we think is a shell, and that is to represent that placeholder. But again, they're still using them as placeholders. That's not to mean that these ancient cultures did not have already an idea of nothingness or nothing, but I'm just saying the zero, the concept of zero, wasn't the way we use it today. Okay, in the Vedic period, what's interesting about the Vedic period was that many of the mathematical works were conveyed orally through sutras. And after approximately 500 BC, they were transmitted both orally and in manuscript form. Probably at this point, they're publishing or writing down a lot of commentaries. But the Subhat Sutras, which means aphorisms of the chords, they were recited in the building of sacrificial fire altars, wherein the rules and problems would be orally communicated in verse, in this case, to aid memorization. I also think it was used because it was important knowing the intimate relationship between Sanskrit and sound. It was probably done orally for other reasons as well. But it is theorized that the author of the Subha Sutras existed before 600 BC and could not have been influenced by Greek geometry. The early Vedic mathematicians, such as Bhaskara II, Brahmagupta, and Aryabhata, contributed to the mathematical landscape. The decimal system was first recorded in India, and other contributions involving the use and concept of zero were used, including the decimal numbering system, negative numbers, trigonometry, and algebra, which are used to this day. Here we have an interesting evolution of the zero, which started out, you can see, in Brahmi, and then, which was in the 1st century, Common Era. And then the 9th century, we have a little dot. And anyways, we can kind of see how it evolved into an actual zero-looking glyph. The Indian dot placeholder would eventually go on to gain true number status. It was first described in 628 AD by the Indian astronomer and mathematician Brahmagupta. He may have been the first to place the zero in an equation as an actual number. He would define the zero by making the statement that any number subtracted by zero remains that number. Any number added by a zero remains that number. So he's giving it a number status, and it's really allowing that zero to take place within within a system with its own value. And this revolutionary treatment allowed for a baseline in mathematics, which was essential for calculus and graphing, among other functions. In fact, all technology in our modern world depends on the factoring of zero as a baseline, a kind of centerpiece or womb from which all other numbers, positive and negative, are born.
Mm.
So the Muslim mathematician back in 773 AD, and I hope I can say his name correctly, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, he actually demonstrated how zero functioned in the systems of formulas that he called algebra, which came to be known as algebra, which we use today. By the 10th century, the zero had entered the Arabic numeral system in a form resembling the oval shape we use today. The early Greeks did not use a zero. Aristotle argued that if it wasn't you couldn't divide it, there was no point in having it. So they really didn't use it right away. The Roman numerals, as you see here, were used throughout Europe from 800 BC to 1400 CE. They were introduced earlier, but it would take a long time for the zero to really work its way into the European mind. Zeros were not needed, they figured, because the system that they worked in was primarily for trade. It would take the influence of the Italian merchant and mathematician Leonardo da Pisa, otherwise known as Fibonacci, to bring Rome into modernity by introducing the Hindu-Arabic numeral system to Europe. He did that around the 13th century. Still, the transition would be a slow one. The use of zero was discouraged and banned in many parts of Europe, as there existed the belief, likely due to Western Christian dogma, that the zero was heretical, dark, and demonic. What can I say? So we have to think about where would it be without the zero. We watched it kind of grow from almost non-existence, or being very from non-existence in the sense of a zero, sense of a glyph, to allowing us to be able to make abstractions, because it really helps us to have this ability to see beyond the numbering system, to see the negative, to imagine beyond our very restricted numbers. And without the true binary system, we don't have this understanding of a number from no number, which basically gives us our binary system. The computers that we're on right now run off of binary systems based on zeros and ones. I think it's really interesting. I've always thought it was kind of interesting that we have a system based on a number from no number. Excuse me. It makes me wonder whether or not our computers are just replicas, in a sense, mirroring the cosmos. Anyway, it's this on-off system. Without the zero, modern electronics wouldn't exist. Without zero, there's no calculus, no modern engineering or automation. Zeros allow us to imagine a baseline, like we said before, a centerpiece from which all other points, negative and positive, rational, irrational, and so on, can stem. One could say that the zero is the womb from which all other numbers emerge. I just thought it was very appropriate to put in this from stanza 4, sloka 1. Listen, ye sons of the earth, to your instructors, the sons of fire, learn there is neither first nor last, for all is one number issued from no number. So at this point, we're going to talk a little bit about digital reduction because going forward, we're going to be using it. I think I can't say that everyone knows about digital reduction. So just to be safe, we'll just go through it. It's really, really easy. Digital reduction is the process of finding a base or root number for a series of numbers by adding the digits together, then reducing the sums to one digit, one root number. Digital reduction serves to place numbers back into their natural orientation, a circle. So even if a number series is, going off into a linear direction, if you add them up and put them back into one number, it's like you're putting them back into a circle. And so most of our graphs these days that have to do with geometry start with a circle. And oftentimes you'll see numbers around them. There's many, many different systems. But what it does is it helps us to see manifestation through the lens of a circle. So here I have an example, 45,763. If we add these five numbers together, we get 25. If we add 2 and 5 together, we get 7. And 7 is going to be your root number for this series. Does everybody understand that basic part?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm giving you an example here of how important these root numbers are. We're going to take these same numbers, 4, 5, 7, 6, 3, and I arranged them in different addition problems. So they're all mixed up. All these numbers are mixed up, and they're coming out with different sums. But if you add those sums together, in every case, you're going to get that same root number. Again, we're putting them back into a circle. So everything is logical about this. There's nothing magical about it. It's all logic. I know I showed this to my sister and she thought it was like a magic trick, and it wasn't. I showed it to my daughter and she says, "Well, that's just logical." I said, "Yeah, you're right." Just logic.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the golden ratio for just a moment because it's important. B is important. This number is important because it really helps us to understand the symmetry of the universe. Mathematical patterns are inherent in nature. The pattern was known at least since 600 to 800 BCE as elements of the golden ratio show up in Sanskrit texts. However, the numeric series or sequence was mapped out by, we mentioned him earlier, Mr. Fibonacci, in the medieval times. The number series has since been used to identify growth patterns in all of physical nature, in plants, animals, and humans, but also in weather phenomena such as air and ocean currents, hurricanes, and tornadoes. Even the proportions and measurements of the human body from DNA molecules to each segment of its outward temple is subject to these divine measurements. So what is the Fibonacci sequence? Most people are probably aware of it, but we'll just go through it. So we have this series here, and what it's doing is it's counting the number before it and itself to get to the next number. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, and so on and so on and so on. That's all it's doing to come up with phi. That's the symbol here. Oh, and by the way, I have a little notation here that I threw in because I found it late. But the Indian poet and mathematician Pingala in the 3rd to 2nd century authored a treatise on Sanskrit prosody called Chandasastra. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, which is the first known description of a binary system based on the systematic enumeration of meter. And this treaty, let me just get out of here. Oops, let me go back. I need to go back again. He also had a numbering system that described this Fibonacci sequence. So again, we oftentimes honor the Greeks and the Italians and the Europeans for things that were actually discovered long before, they just hadn't been formalized, perhaps. So we're going to take this Fibonacci sequence here, and we're going to go into the double and triple and even quadruple digits down here. But what I'm going to do is when we get to the double digits and forward, I'm going to change them to I'm going to digitally reduce them to their root number. And we can see that 13 becomes 4, 21 becomes 3, 34 becomes 7, et cetera, et cetera. But notice how it doesn't lose its integrity when we do this. 4 plus 3 equals 7. 3 plus 7 equals 10, which reduces to 1. 7 plus 1 is 8. 1 plus 8 is 9. 8 plus 9 is 17, which reduces to 8. 8 plus 9, etc. So we're not losing the integrity of the number when we reduce it. Still, that pattern exists. Does everybody follow?
Yeah, very well said.
Thank you. So now we're going to look at some facts about 9 in digital reduction, because we're probably going to come across it at some point. If we add 9 to a number or series of number or number set and apply digital reduction, the 9 actually will act as a 0. It will not affect the sum of its members. We have some examples here. So if 9 plus 3 equals 42, we can reduce that into 9 plus 6 equals 6. Okay? If I have a number 3.9999999, it's going to reduce to 3. When you have 9 with any other set of numbers, you could actually take the 9 out and or the 9s out if you have more than them, and just count up the numbers that are left behind. And there you'll have your root. 9 is interesting because in the number line, all of its multiples are there. So you have 90 and 9, 81 and 18, 72 and 27, 36 and 63, 54 and 45. They basically mirror each other. They are actually in the number line. We'll see that a little later. And the sums of all numbers multiplied by 9, even fractions, will digitally reduce to 9. Even fractions. And you can test that when you get home, or you're already home, but so we're going to double the number line. I think it's important to look at your number line and just start playing with the numbers, to just jump in and play with them using this digital reduction system. So I've taken this number line and I've doubled it. And the doubling is here in the yellow. And you'll see that 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 3 becomes 6, 4 becomes 8, 5 becomes 1. And I'm kind of blocking it off because I want to show where the center is, basically. 6 becomes 3, 7 doubled is 14, and 1 and 4 is 5. 8 doubled is 16, and 6 and 1 is 7. And of course, 9 doubled is 18, and 8 and 1 is 9. Mm-hmm. What's interesting in this is I see duality occurring. So just in the number line, I see all the evens on one side and the odds on the other. And we know from Pythagoras, well, at least he considered all of the evens feminine and all of the odds male. So we kind of see this dividing happening even on a linear scale. But see what happens in a minute here. It was Nikola Tesla who said, if you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe, or at least a key to the universe. Mm-hmm. Why is he saying that? Well, let's try tripling those numbers. If we triple 1, we get 3. If we triple 2, we get 6. If we triple 3, we get 9. And then it starts to repeat itself. And this repetition occurs all the way, all the way. Again, we're putting the numbers in a round. So we know that we're adding 1 to each one of these numbers. So we're going to be adding 3, 3, 6, and 9. It gives you basically your trinity here. And we can check our math using a scale system. And what I've done here is I've just basically moved the bar. So in the first set, I'm counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, leaving the 9 out. Then I'm counting in the second row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then in the last one, I'm leaving the 1 out and I'm counting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9. Oops, sorry. 8, 9, 10, or 8, 9, 1, because we've reduced it. When you reduce these numbers, you end up in the first case with 3s all the way, not just here, all the way. If you move the scale up, you end up with 6s all the way. And if you move the scale up again, it'll be 9 again, all the way. So we have our 3, 6, 9. It's just another way of expressing it, but it's the same idea. Instead of doing 3, 6, 9, we're doing 3s, and then all 6s, and then all 9s. Interesting enough, in our number line from 1 to 9, we end up with 6, 6, 6. Well, the 6s, though, shouldn't be seen as something evil or anything like that, because, we know that we go through a round. We have to go through the rounds and the root races and the sub races. And everything, once it reaches 6, culminates in the 7th. So it may be indicative of an alignment of sorts, too. So here's another way of looking at the number line, and you can see this if you go to page 37 in the SD Volume 2. It's written there in front of you. The only thing I've done here is to kind of show the connections. So we have a circle, which is basically just our number line that's been taken from its ends and glued together at the bottom to form a circle. And we can see that, let's just read here what she says. Regarding sources of measures, the foundation of the Kabbalah and all its mystic book is made to rest upon the 10 Sephiroth. So what we're looking at here is a Sephiroth, but it's without all the qualifiers. You don't see Kether, you're not going to see, you're not looking at Bina, you're not looking at any of the qualifiers. Chokmah and Nefesh and Malkuth. But what we're looking at is just like the scaffolding. And in this scaffolding, it mirrors the number line above. And here it says, let's see, rest upon the 10 Sephiroth, or the 10 numbers, in the following diagram, wherein the circle is the knot, the no number. Its vertical diameter line is the first of primal 1. So we're getting our 1 here by the dividing line. And it is the first of the primal 1, the word of logos, or logos. So she's calling this 1 that first primal logos. So how do we know where this 1 comes from? And we're probably going to talk about this a little later when we talk about primes, but I just want us to get us used to the symmetry that is here, because you have the 2 and the 9 on one side, the 2 being a prime and an even number. The 9 is a non-prime and an odd number. You have 3, which is a prime and an odd number, and 8, which is a non-prime and even number. Again, 4, which is a even and non-prime. On the other side, 7, which is a prime and an odd number, and so on. 5 being a prime, odd number, and 6 being an even non-prime number. So you can kind of see the symmetry that's formed here. And of course, we've got the sloka below. So when we look at this, based on the Kabbalah, we can see how it kind of mirrors the Sephirot, that meaning the menorah or the Hanukkah. Looks almost exactly like this configuration here. So let me see if I can move my screen so I can read. Okay. Although exoterically used in Jewish and rabbinical rites to honor the miracle when, during the reestablishment of the temple, 1 day's amount of oil miraculously lasted 8 days. Both the 7-branched and 9-branched, basically the menorah, are considered by many Kabbalists to represent the Sephirot, or the lighting of the chambers. Could this represent, and I'm asking the question here, that could these represent the microcosm, the 7-branch, and the macrocosm as the 9-branch? I don't know. But it seems like they could and they should, because you're dealing with light. And the Zohar is all about light. Let me move on. So here we're getting into the primes a little bit. You know, we saw on the number line how, let me go back to the number line actually so I can show this better. How we got to this 1. We don't have a 1 over here. We have it in here. So what we're doing is we're looking at the distance. Now we have to look at the distance between the numbers. Because remember, in the circle, in order to build anything, you have to have 3 points. You have to have your sender, your receiver, but then you have to have a medium. And in this case, I think your mediums are your prime numbers, because beyond 1, which is your number here, and is represented by the distance between 5 and 6. When we think about 4 and 7, what's the distance between 4 and 7? Hello?
3.
3, thank you. What is the distance between 3 and 8?
5.
There you go. And the distance between 2 and 9?
7.
Thank you. So moving on to the next, the only thing I've done here,
Oh.
thing keeps getting in the way, is I brought those numbers down the middle because I want them to represent the distance. Remember, we have to have it triangulated. There have to be 3 parts. And so here, if we take 5 plus 1 plus 6, we get 12, and that reduces to 3, which informs the next. 4 plus 3 plus 7 equals 14 and reduces to 5, which informs the next. 3 plus 5 plus 8 equals 16, which reduces to 7, which informs the next. And if we add all of these up, we end up with 16, which equals 7. I thought it was just interesting because in our stanzas it says, Bochad is the steed and the thought is the rider. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 regions above and the 7 below. And she writes, we see the figures in 1, 3, 5, and 7 as perfect because thoroughly mystic numbers playing a prominent part in every cosmogony and evolution of living beings. The explanation of it becomes evident when one examines the ancient symbols. And this isn't, this is just observational. I can move this on. Here we go. Speaking of 7, so 7 is the largest prime in the number line and is widely considered sacred. In fact, there are few places in societal and religious communities where the number 7 hasn't played a major role in our everyday lives. The 7 days of the week, the 7 notes on an octave, the 7 continents and 7 seas, the 7 prismatic colors, the 7 sacred planets, 7 virtues, the 7 degrees of perfection, 7 days of creation and the 7 deadly sins, the 7 sisters and daughters of Atlas in the Pleiades, and in Theosophy and other spiritual studies, the 7 Manus, the 7 Kumaras, the 7 creations of Brahma, the 7 fires, and the septenary constitution of man. In the Seal of Solomon of the Hebrew mystics, the 7 is depicted as the mergence of the upward pointing triangle with the downward pointing triangle, the macrocosm merging with the microcosm. KH notes in the Master's letters, says, of course, you know that the double triangle, the Sat Iri chakram of Vishnu, or the 6-pointed star, is the perfect 7. This last figure, the central point, being implied, for it is the germ of the 6 and their matrix. So I think that's interesting. He calls it the germ of the 6, but also their matrix. It is then thus the central point standing for 7th, the upper pointing one wisdom concealed and the downward pointing one wisdom revealed in the phenomenal world. But I want to talk about 9. We've talked a little bit about other numbers. I really want to kind of focus the next few slides on 9. We see 9 as a spiral. It is not just the end, it is also representative of the beginning. So it's not just a complete circle, it's like it got a tail at the end. In some ways, it reminds us of pi. The digital root of all yugas, as we know, equals 9. The Kali, the Dwapara, Treta, Satya, all end or are digitally reduced down to 9. The sagas of Oda, who rules over the 9 Norse worlds, the 9 cosmic levels noted in Native American and Mesoamerican myths. In Hinduism, 9 is the number of Rama. In numerology, 9 represents completion of one cycle and the preparation or gestation of the next. It is not finality. Here's something I also find really interesting, and this is the 9 goddesses in myth. The number 9 is composed of 3 trinities and is often associated with goddesses in ancient myths. In England, Ireland, Wales, Scandinavia, Iceland, India, Greece, and beyond, the myths of 9 mystical women presiding over nature was common. 9 is the central number in the ancient Celtic tradition. 9 is expressed through the triple goddess and in myths of the 9 Celtic maidens or sorceresses. The 9 muses in Greek mythology were daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, goddess of memory. Zeus and Mnemosyne had a love affair that lasted 9 nights and produced 9 daughters. And it's interesting that that actually became our 9 muses. And what I found interesting is that she's a goddess of memory. And we know that memory is often affiliated with anything that like a vessel that contains something is given always a feminine attribute, I guess. But within that containment, remember, mind was not, for there was no Agi to contain it. In that containment is the memory. And it serves to inform and guide that spirit. So in Hinduism, 9 sisters are known collectively as Navadurga, personified protectors representing power, strength, protection, knowledge, wealth, fertility, and moksha. And in the Roman tradition, 9 goddesses presided over the sea and the waters and controlled storms, waves, and tides. And they were oftentimes worshipped before going, into the sea for fishing or just for navigational purposes, even war. So now we're going to get into some fun here. This here is a Vedic square using digital reduction. So the digital reduction is already in it. I didn't put it in it. And it's a multiplication table. So real slowly, I'll go through it just with you. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. So they put down the 1, because 1 plus 0 is 1, etc., all the way through. And it does it with the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5, etc. But it always is reducing the number down to its root. But when you count the numbers across, you always end up with 9, with multiples of 9. Look here. The first line sums up to 45, the second to 36, the third line to 54, the fourth line to 45, the fifth line to 45, the sixth line to 54, and on and on and on. And the Vedic square is using a 9 by 9 grid. Here's some multiplication of primes. Now we see here that we've got also, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got a larger grid going on here. But we're using only prime numbers to multiply across the board here. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 11 is 55. There's no digital reduction happening here right now. But at least the numbers are here. And so most of them are 2 and 3 digits long. But so I took the liberty of, like I always do, digitally reducing them. And the interesting thing is that once you digitally reduce them, you end up with symmetry, of course, going across. The first line going across is going to look exactly like the first vertical line going down. The second horizontal line going across is going to look exactly like the second horizontal line going down. And all of these numbers, same thing with the previous slide, end in once you digitally reduce them, end up in 9. Which is interesting to me because you're talking about multiplication of prime numbers, which I'm not sure, but I don't think they have a noticeable pattern. There probably is a pattern to it. But for them to all equal 9 in this way is interesting. It's an observation. So I created this grid, these grids here, and all these grids are addition. And addition using 9 by 9 grids. And all you're doing here is using reduction, digital reduction again. 1 plus 1 is 2. I can't see my grids because this thing's in the way. Let me move it. And move that too. You know how you get those lines everywhere and I can't get rid of them? Okay. 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 plus 1 is 5. And then you go down here, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 4 is 10. You bring down the 1, 1 plus 5 is 6. So you kind of get what I'm doing here in this first grid.
Yeah.
So what I did is I actually didn't stop. I said, okay, Des, let's see what happens when you do this 3 times, which is exactly what I did. Did it 3 times. And when I couldn't figure out if there was what the pattern was in the second grid, but what's interesting is when I got to the third grid down at the bottom, I ended up with all 9s. And then those lines translated into all 1s. And then it made me think of, stanza 4 again, sloka 5, where it says, the Adisanat, the number for he is 1 and 9. The voice of the Lord Sabavat, the numbers for he is 1 and 9. Anyway, I want to go on to this is just an interesting article by this gentleman by the name of Lucian Khan. he did back in 2013. I haven't studied it quite that. I just looked at it briefly. I'm going to go back and study it some more. But he's using Fibonacci sequences here, and then he's adding the numbers up, and he's showing how many degrees are in each and every one of these cycles. Looks like there's 4 cycles here, and all of the numbers add up into either 108, 540, or 216. Of course, those are considered sacred numbers, all reducible to the root of 9. So I've included some of the numbers here. I'm going to ask someone else to read this. I'm getting a little hoarse, but this is from the SD, Volume 2, page 621 to 622. HPV is talking about these sacred numbers in relation to the circle. Could someone please read this? And I promise this is the last slide.
You to read it. Okay. The numbers are explained in the commentaries in these words. The circle is not the one, but the all. In the higher heaven, the impenetrable Raja, it, the circle, becomes one because the indivisible, and there can be no Ta in it. In the second, 3 worlds, the one becomes 2, male and female, and 3 add the sun or logos, and the sacred 4. In the third, the lower world or our earth, the number becomes 4 and 3 and 2. Take the first 2, and thou wilt obtain 7, the sacred number of life. Blend the latter with the middle Raja, and thou wilt have 9, the sacred number of being and becoming. When the Western Orientalists have mastered the real meaning of the Rig Veda divisions of the world, the 2-fold, 3-fold, 6 and 7-fold, and especially the 9-fold division, the mystery of the cyclic divisions applied to heaven and earth, gods and men, will become clearer to them than it is now.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank
And
you.
there are my references, and guess what? I had 36 slides.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Oh my gosh. I didn't plan it that way though.
Well, thank you. What a magnificent presentation.
Oh, thanks, Monica.
So wonderful. Okay, so why don't we open it up for questions? I'd like to,
Oh, it's 5:30. Oh my goodness.
without being a bug. If you could turn on your camera, that would be great. If you don't want to, it's okay. So am I now going to,
Shobha.
Shobha.
It was magnificent, Desiree. Just loved it, loved it. I mean, I was waiting for this because numbers just excite me.
Yeah.
It's just
Good.
incredible. I love the reduction. I was thinking of so many things that are so relatable to what we study. The first thing that hit me was the patterns. The tessellation reminded me of the as above, so below Hermetic Maxium. Okay, that was one thing I thought about. And then, of course, I've forgotten all the other connections I made, but it doesn't matter. The other one that really I thought about was no wonder Pythagoras, or like the Greeks say, Pythagoras, wanted his students to study mathematics. I mean, it's like the fundamental thing that you need to know. The other thing that always strikes me when we talk about numbers is this whole thing about uh, the harmony and the music, and then the sense of the music of the spheres makes perfect sense. But thank you so much. I just
Well, you're
love it.
welcome. I want
Thank
everybody to go and get their calculators out now.
Good.
Jeffrey? Thank you, Shobha.
Yeah, I also found it really fascinating, and numbers have sort of a mystique, which I just can't put my finger on. I'll go round and round about it. But I was wondering, in regard to the special status of 9, where you can add up the digits and they always go back to 9. I wonder if that's because it's the number that precedes 10, and we have a decimal system. Okay, so say, for example, we had a base 7 system instead of a base 10 system. Wouldn't 6 in many respects have the same function as 9?
Perhaps in the middle. 'Cause I look at it as kind of a trinity there, because you need to have 3 points. You can't have 2 points that just terminate. You have to have 3 points for any kind of continuity. So 3 is really your baseline. Your 3 and your 6 and your 9 really do create that triadic form that you need in order to build anything. So and that's the triple 3, triple threat.
So you don't. What I'm asking is, say, like the Mayans had a base 20 system, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then 19 in that system would be similar to what you're describing as 9. So you
Mhm.
have, I'm wondering the extent to which, what you're describing even now with the 3, 6, and 9 works for a base 10 system, which I guess now a
Mhm.
lot of countries have. I think in ISIS, if I remember, HBB said that at some point in the past, in the subcontinent, they had a base 7 system.
No.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I might be wrong about that. I haven't read it in a long time, but
Well, now Pythagoras really thought that 10 was it.
mhm, mhm. Right.
Yeah.
So, and do you agree?
That
I
10
mean,
is it.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to leave that up to everybody.
Okay.
You know, I try to see the numbers 1 through 9 and 10 together, because that's, to me, what makes it complete. Because for me, you have to have 3 threes.
Mhm.
Because you just have to. It creates, the 3 is so important, just in terms of understanding how anything is built. And so for me, it has to be 333 or 666 or 999 or 369.
The goose drank wine. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm fine. Other people can answer that or comment, please.
No, I think your answer is fine. I mean, maybe it's.
Yeah, and I understand the Mayans did have a 20 base
20
system,
days.
but they think that might have been because they had, 10 fingers and 10 toes. But they also introduced 18 at some point.
18 what?
I'm trying to think if it was 20 days per month over 18 months. But anyways,
Oh, okay.
I think it was that way.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, thank you.
Judy? Hi there.
Yes, thank you for a great presentation. I've never been very good at math, but I got very
Neither have I.
interested. I got very interested once I learned about the Fibonacci sequence and the aesthetics that were behind it, and also, in a sense, the Platonic idea that numbers are behind everything. We can't exist without number. But my essential question is, are there only really 9 numbers, as you said? Because every other number has a repetition of the first 9. Are there an infinite number of numbers? I mean, I understand Euclid proved there are an infinite number of prime numbers. Therefore, there must be an infinite number of numbers.
Mhm.
And so, what do we do with this?
Well,
Maybe
there are
does this
infinite
prove?
number. Yeah, I would imagine there are infinite numbers, but
Yes.
the reduction is like a shorthand for getting to the pattern. Now, how one interprets that pattern is up to the individual, but numbers, in my opinion, don't lie. You know, if you do your math correctly, if you do your adding correctly, or your multiplication correctly, they should, you know, come out. If they show a pattern, that pattern is true. Now, what that pattern means is, like I said, up to the individual to interpret that. But yeah, I do think they're infinite, but they are related to a specific archetype. And from that archetype, they can move in every direction or every dimension, but the archetype remains. Do you understand? It's the pattern that we're looking at, not necessarily how many there are, but the pattern itself.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I don't. If I didn't answer that question, somebody else could also
No,
help.
you did, and you also have proved that women really are good at math.
Well,
I was once told that women
I
just
like numbers. I don't know that I'm good at math, but I really have developed a kind of, I don't know, obsession with them.
Well, I had erasers thrown at me at algebra class, so I got a little bit turned off for a while
Oh,
until I
not nice.
read about the aesthetics behind it. Yes, okay.
Oh, not
Thank you
nice.
very much. Yeah.
Eric?
Yes, thank you, Desiree. You took us into places regarding number that I had no inkling that that's where we were going to go today. So I
Oh,
appreciate
sorry.
that. No, it was a learning experience.
Okay.
So I really appreciate it. But I just wanted to mention that one of the key things that HPB sort of hints at in Isis Unveiled, and then she states it very dramatically in The Secret Doctrine, is that, and this is on page 361 and 362 of Volume 1, where she's saying, well, you know, we can't prove it. We can't show you written evidence of it, but all the ancient cosmological systems, every single one, she says, begin with the 0 and the 1, the circle and the line, the vertical line. And she says that, and because of that, it will eventually be proved that the decimal system was known to the earliest archaic humanity, and that it was the basis of the secret sacerdotal language. So it's really, and the reason that it was became unknown, generally unknown, is because it was so sacred.
Mhm.
It was hidden, and this is why even in what we have, the few fragments we have of Pythagorean teaching, say in Hierocles' commentary on the verses, for example, he skips over the 0. The 0 is not mentioned because it's too sacred, and so that's just one component. Which, you know, if you look at the symbol language of the Secret Doctrine, right, it begins with the circle, right, and which is of course the 0. The boundless circle she equates with the 0. So that's just one note, and then two other short notes. One is that in the Pythagorean and Greek tradition, of course, the quadrivium it had 4 parts to it, right? It had arithmetic, of course, and they were all considered aspects of mathematics: arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy. So, and it wasn't until you had studied all of those that you would be considered for entrance into the academy or the Pythagorean school. So, we've got a lot of work to do in that sense.
Yeah, we do.
But then the last thing is one of the distinctions that is very commonly made regarding number is the distinction between what we think of as quantitative number and what's called qualitative number. And so this gets into deeper aspects of numerology in which the number has a deep meaning, a deep specific significance to it. And this is why you get the first line of the golden verses of Pythagoras is, in the first place, revere the immortal gods who are established by the law. And of course, he's referring to number. That's one of the symbols of the originating deities. Is in the Pythagorean tradition is the number system, and also the geometrical configurations that go along with it. So I'm just wondering, maybe you could comment on that a little bit, the distinction between quantitative number as opposed to qualitative.
Well, when I think of the number 0, I don't even think of it as 0, so to speak, but I think of it as a womb that holds the numbers in potential. And the 1, or maybe it holds the numbers in synthesis, and the 1 holds it in potential. So I'm looking at it abstractly. And as I look at it abstractly, there is a certain reverence that fills the room because I'm not attaching my own personal whatever. I'm not trying to make it into a personal feeling. I'm not trying to give it quality. I'm trying to see it in a way, in a universal way, as one thing, as one unified experience. So I don't think I'm answering your question, but I'm trying to convey to you what that quality, if we can even term it a quality, is to me, and that is reverence. Plain and simple. I don't view numbers as objects. I view them as entities, if that makes sense. Living entities.
Lovely. Well, Desiree, I had a question, and Kurt touched on it very briefly, but regarding the number 108 and 9 and the number 13, it's always been put before this student that 9 has a significant number in terms of a cycle of growth and evolution, like it seems to represent a time period of a specific accomplishment in terms of development of some kind. And the other thing is a lot of mantra repetition. The directive is always 108 repetitions of a given mantra has it gives an opportunity for a student. So in addition to that, in terms of numerology, I've heard others speak of using the number 9 as opposed to 13 regarding endings. So I don't know, maybe that's just nothing. But
somebody else might be better
I wanted to know what you thought.
practices, I don't know.
It's 9, the number 108, and 13 if you feel like looking at that.
Would anybody else like to look at that? Or comment on those numbers? Please chime in. I know I have a question of my own that I wanted to pose at the very beginning, but I don't want to. I don't want to interrupt your question either. Does anybody want to respond to the? I guess the
I'm
secret
not sure.
meaning behind those numbers.
I'm not sure what Monica meant when there are particularly specifically sacred numbers, like in the Jewish Kabbalah or the Chaldean Kabbalah, wherever it came from. Every letter in the Torah has a number, and so studying Kabbalah is a study of numerology, and you're supposed to be able to find out its true meaning if you understand the numbers behind all these Hebrew letters. And that is something that I have never done. I think it would be quite tedious, but apparently there have been some great geniuses produced by it. So is that what, Monica? I don't know. Is that what you're getting at?
That's definitely helpful. Thank you very much, Judy.
I was thinking similar thing. I was gonna say, well, like, I know 13 is a sacred number, in Kabbalah, but also we all know it's like the 13 moons, the 28 days. But, I wrote this reference down. It's probably not the best unless more people understand. But there's this geneticist named Lloyd Pye who once did this lecture on the torus, and he covered it with the numbers, 369 and all the numbers. And what he found was on the lip before the torus went into itself again was the number 9, and he figured that this was like the number that was sacred, that had to do with like why ancient Egyptian mysticism and why like the Windsors and a lot of the royals still hold the numbers to be sacred. And it has to do with like eternity and a regeneration. If I can find it, I'll put it up. But it's actually like I did study a little bit of Kabbalah. And when you do start to feel the personality of the numbers and the colors and the synthesia. It really is fascinating. You have to kind of keep a level head while you're doing it and take a couple of breaks. But
A lot
yeah,
of what studies in the Kabbalah have to do with meditating on numbers. In fact, one of the books I'm reading now is Meditation in the Kabbalah. And it's full of numbers.
Oh, just curious about anyone's input. I tried to like kind of look at the Sefer Yetzirah, which is just like all numbers and math, and it was so fascinating. And I was also reading about Pythagoras and how the things, most of what he did was like an oral tradition or orally transmitted, and he didn't allow people to write down the real teachings. He had like a general teaching, and then he had so the numbers that you think are important are even more. Like like the dodecahedron and 21 and 11 are also extremely important numbers, but he didn't want to teach those to everyone. So if anyone has an insight.
I kind of think
The Sefer
that
Yetzirah.
I think that was kind of what was going on with the sutras too, because they're
Yeah, that's what you
translating
think about it when you were saying it.
orally these probably in some cases very mystical ideas, but if to write them down, not only does it risk being the information getting degraded, but then it also exposes those traditions to maybe people you don't want it exposed to. So, and I just think that the sutras being conveyed in Sanskrit, and Sanskrit having such an intimate relationship to sound and number, they had to have been transmitted orally. I just feel like they would have lost meaning done a different way. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but just
No, I think it's totally
is
true.
that.
I've read that that's part of it. And that makes sense. And there's also like a vibration of the tone when you say those things out loud.
Yeah, and the meter and and there's mathematical ways of coding it and decoding just to make sure it was correct. I mean, it's just there's so much math involved in every little syllable and how it's stated and where it's stated. And if you miss one syllable, the whole math equation goes out the window. It's yeah, it's crazy. I don't think I could do that. But I did have a question in the very beginning, and it had to do with the Pythagorean statement that number rules ideas. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm having these ideas and they are about number, but are they ruled by number? Would anybody like to tackle that one or just contemplate it in the thin air here?
Meluka?
Oh, Maluka. I'm sorry, Maluka.
Hi, good afternoon. Very insightful, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Maluka.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the master always say that numbers are the key to knowledge. And then and as far as entities, I do believe numbers are entity. And the way that I think it is that could be proven is what HPB talks about. When those numbers get together, a lot of things happen. Like when the 8 and 9 or 8, horrible thing happen into the world, and great figures die, and then the other thing is if you turn upside down the 8 is become an infinite.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I was thinking of 10. If you reverse them, it could become a line and a circle. I mean, you know what I mean? They all kind of position themselves differently according to what they want to do. They are those entities bringing I think they are producers of karma, because how else can you explain what HPB is talking about when she talks about that article 1888, what do I say, Jet of Morrow, and also that the cycle of the planet and the moon, what is it, 28 days, everything is ruled by the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's true. It's absolutely true. Everything is ruled by numbers, but ideas? You want to tackle that one?
Well, I think that's it's a key. It's a key to the teaching, really. That it's not just on the physical plane that everything we see in manifested nature is governed by number, which is another way of saying it's governed by divine intelligence. But that the metaphysical planes of ideation and of thought, and even of logoic unfoldment, can also has, I think this is very much connected with the idea of qualitative number, where you're for example, each of the planes of what we call human nature or cosmic nature have a number associated with them, and it's not a again, it's not a quantitative association; it's a qualitative. So you for example, you sometimes get the association with color and sound, right? And both of which have vibratory rates associated with them, and provide you could say, like, it's the aura of meaning associated with a certain level of ideation, a certain level of matter, and of energy, and that apparently
fidelity. Like
what's that?
Would it have to do with fidelity? The fidelity of the sound, the fidelity of the light.
Yeah, well, they're mysteries, so I'm not claiming to know these things, but as far as I understand the teaching as given in the SD and also in the Voice of the Silence, that metaphysical planes are both moral and are both morally and mentally governed by number. That there's an exact kind of calculation that goes on for the wise, for those who can see into those dimensions of nature. And that is why for example, a very wise person could see and this is said of Pythagoras, right? That he could tell just by the way a person walked across the room, or their manner of laughter, the way their relationships with other people, that he could see the unseen qualities of the soul by those visible and audible qualities of the person, because there's a mathematical relationship between all of our, say, karmic characteristics, and the sort of the moral tenor of our inner nature as well. So that's just to point to some of the mystery without claiming to know it all.
So karma is like the divine mathematician in all this, in a sense.
I have an example.
I think Judy had her hand up. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sure.
Oh, well, I'll be very brief. It just occurred to me that you could have the numerical forms in Plato's teaching before the aesthetic forms, because the aesthetic forms all depend on number. What I realized this is when I was doing Shaolin Kempo, I wrote a paper on it and I started drawing out the patterns of the kata, the forms that we did that are like dances. And I realized they were pure geometry that Grandmaster William Shao brought from China. And you had to, whether you're kicking, jumping, punching, twirling, whatever you were doing, you had to do it in this geometrical pattern. So if it weren't for the number, you would not have the aesthetics, and you would not have even any sport or anything at all. So that's all.
That's a great comment, Judy.
Yeah, and I think I understand even better.
If I could just interject one little point here, is that because I've been your study of 9 was really interesting, and you know how in the that master's letter which you referred to, the 6-pointed star, he says that it fundamentally what it's pointing to is the 7, right? It's a 6-pointed star, but he says no, it's the 7, which permeates the philosophy, the number 7, and we often also see the symbol of a triangle within the 6-pointed star, right? Well, how many points do we have there? We have 9. But what is it the symbol of? It's this. It's the 10. It's really the symbol of the 10, because you have to include the center point and circumference as sort of the synthesis of the whole. So that's when I started wondering about that perhaps that the importance of the 9 in one of its aspects is that it's suggestive of the unseen synthesis of the whole. Just as the 6 really suggests the 7, the 9 suggests the 10, but it's the hidden 10.
It's the hidden 10. It's the culmination of the Trinity, then leading into the next stage. So it's the triple 3. I don't know what else. It's there have to be 3 stages times 3. If that makes any sense, I don't know. It has to be 3 times 3.
So in China, 8's an important number. So is 8 a blind for 7 or for 9? So I mean, I'm kind of joking, because you can do anything with numbers. You could say, I mean, and I want to say one thing though, that in China, 9 also is associated with goddesses or empresses. That confirms what you're saying. But also back to the question about ideas. Aristotle, I think this is in Metaphysics. Metaphysics, his book Metaphysics, ends with 2 chapters on numbers. And some people just said, metaphysics is just this hodgepodge, and they put them at the end because they didn't fit anywhere. I disagree. I think that numbers is of course, in the Platonic school, they said, what was it? let no one enter here who does not know geometry was something that was attributed. So, and Aristotle wasn't great at mathematics. So, but he said that, according to him, Plato said that the ideas are numbers. And so, and you look at Proclus, who of course came, several hundred years later, but it was sort of the summation of the Platonic schools in some respect. He starts with the idea that how Plato has the one, and then the next step is the large and the small, or the duality, and so they're trying to bridge from the one to the many is a bridge that all philosophers try to make, and Blavatsky was doing it, of course, in The Secret Doctrine. And if I remember, Proclus comes up with this idea that it could be divided and yet united at the same time. So, so you have a one branching out. He doesn't say 7, but from our ideas, maybe be 1 to 2 to 3 to 7 or whatever. However.
I tend to think those are the logos points where they where they come together and then also divide.
Okay, good.
Observation. I think that has something to do with the logos points, and they may have something to do with the prime numbers. But again, observational.
Yeah, Jeff, there's that passage, I think it's in commentary on the first stanza, where she says that, she's talking about the 7 eternities. And she says it's the sacred division of the indivisible. So it's in one sense, the division is myopic because it's all taking place within the one. And, and that other comment that she makes about what we think of as manifestation is really the one exhibiting aspects of itself to finite minds, right? So it's all a Maya, right? It's in one sense, even Buddhi, it's Ananda Maya Kosha. It's a Maya, but it's a beautiful Maya, and it's an ornamented Maya. It's a wonderfully ornamented Maya.
Yeah. Well, we got to have Maya. We got to have nice, beautiful Maya. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beth, I thought you had your hand up. Was that right?
Yeah, I had an example when you were asking about how does math and numbers and stories. It's kind of an odd one to explain, but if you've seen maybe in like secret societies or the Masonic plaque, they have Euclid 47. And so I knew this was like some kind of clue. And of course, I'm not going to figure it all out because that's why it's a secret society. But so it's a mathematical formula. And if you look at the picture of it, it's a right triangle. It's a Father, Son, and a woman. And then you think this is somehow coming from the Bible or Kabbalah. It's the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. But it's also an image of the sky. So I looked and I figured this had to do with something with astronomy and astrological dates. And the further I looked, I realized that this was like an archetype clue in the holy books, and that this is like an answer they're looking for. So it's one that gets talked about, and it's kind of part of the Bible story. But anyway, they're just trying to give you the smallest clue as to what to look for, and they're giving to you it mathematically by saying Euclid and 47, and then this picture of a right triangle. But then if you are someone like looking for the heights of like either the 33rd degree or trying to get really deep into it, you will try to pursue the answer of this. And it has to do with like everything that we're thinking about,
Yeah.
These stories about rebirthing.
So
does that
what I'm getting at, what I think you're getting at, and tell me if I'm wrong, is just the process of processing is probably more important than anything else. Because when we process, it doesn't really matter because we're never going to find the absolute end result. We're always going to be searching. And I think it's that process of searching that process of trying to understand is what's doing what the mind was intended to do, is to process and connect things,
I was
you know?
I was relating it to the other thing you were actually saying more, like the thing you were talking about archetypes, and this is actually like the clue they give you is an archetype, and then they want you to figure it out and to see if you're smart enough to like relate all the stories back, and it's something that will repeat, but those that have enough clues and then have the mathematical mind to look at it and to apply their other skills that these numbers also have personalities will keep getting more and more enticed. And then your question was like, how do the numbers relate to life? So this is a whole story just based on these like mathematical numbers that someone will figure out if they want to. So like that.
Yeah, I was curious how they related to ideas. Like if I have an idea, and I think Kurt helped in terms of separating it out between the quantity and the quality. But what I find is that the mind is in constant need to connect things. It wants to know. It wants to. It doesn't even want to solve the problem as much as it just wants to be engaged in the problem solving.
It's part of the drive.
It's like that's what it was meant to do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it as the mystery of life, but yeah, that's part of it too. Okay.
Thanks, Beth.
Sure.
Thanks. I'm sorry. Truth, you had something? Question?
Oh yeah, just a few thoughts just to mention is that examples of the relationship between numbers and ideas is that in Greek language and Hebrew language, there was gematria, which is the number value of each letter, which was part of the wordplay involved. And there's also the with Plato, they discovered a musical code hidden within his work, and like a secret musical code.
Wonderful. We had a couple of comments, I believe. The unfoldment, Truth Collins says, the unfoldment of ideas, thinking in terms of various numbers. Let's see. I think I may have missed one. Jeff Clark says, thanks so much, Desiree. We can always count on you. Here. Shova.
No, she just laughed.
Oh, I thought maybe she had a question, a comment to make.
I just have something quick to say. We just finished 9 days of a big festival in India called Navaratri. Nava meaning 9. But the interesting thing is the 10th day is called Vijaya Dashami. So it almost feels like the 9th culminates in the 10th. And I also was thinking about certain languages, like Latin languages, whether it's Italian or Spanish, which I happen to know. The word for 9 is both new and 9. They're very close. And it's the same thing in Sanskrit. Nava can also mean new. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting observation.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of systems out there to observe. If anyone's interested in number patterns, I have a couple of one of the suggestions I think is in the citations. Has to do with, in fact, it was Truth that turned me on to this gentleman, Edward Grant. So I don't know if you can see it. Oh, let me just read it. It's Philomath, the geometric unification of science and art through number. And I just bought another book that I just finished reading it's by Robert Kaplan. It's called The Nothing That Is, a natural history of zero. You can't really see it, but those are two great books. and I'm reading meditation and Kabbalah. Anyway, I'm
Wonderful.
glad everybody made it. They made it
Yes,
through it.
it was a wonderful presentation. I think we have one last comment from Judy. Did you mean to leave your hand up, Judy?
Briefly, I just want to say there is a rather obscure German philosopher named Paul Natorp. I did my dissertation on him, and he says the forms are laws, Gesetz in German. Would you agree with that? They're a basic law of the universe.
Yes, absolutely. Short and sweet.
No good. I'm glad I passed.
Fantastic. Any more comments or questions? Okay. Well, Desiree, thank you for a magnificent
You're
presentation.
very welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really
That's fun. Thanks, Desiree.
terrific. Thank you.
Reminder, everybody, next week, November 4th, the presentation is entitled The Pilgrimage of Humanity, and that will be given by Mr. Patrick Horn. So we hope that you can be with us. All right, then, everybody be well and safe.
Namaste.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Desiree.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thanks, Monica.